Lizzie.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good, thank you.
Are you in the dorms there, or how's it
Um,
working at Winthrop these days?
we are, I'm not currently in a dorm. I live and walk to campus, the little apartments that's off campus, but it's literally right
Uh-huh.
there. Um,
That sounds like kind of the best of both worlds.
it is, yes, ma'am. Dorms are open, but they've said that students should have like a backpack just in case something happens. So I was like,
Yeah.
let's just live off campus.
Yeah. That sounds like a good way to go.
Alrighty. Are you ready?
I am. Hold on just a second. There we go. Get it adjusted here a little bit. Hold on. I'm almost ready. I have too many windows open right now. Oh, not that one. Okay, good deal. So this is a poli-sci course, and what's the specific focus of it?
Essentially just how presidents get elected, the whole process, process of conventions, um, things of that nature.
Yeah, it's a semester course, I take it.
Yes, ma'am. I think so.
Yep. Okay, neat.
Um, are you ready for the first question?
I am, whenever you are ready.
Awesome. Okay. So, how long have you been covering conventions, and were you able to cover the 2016 convention?
So my convention coverage is pretty short in that regard. Usually since we're a local journalism outlet, usually we'll just cover, stories that are local, but often have a lot of national bearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, North Carolina during the elections, there are so many things that have a national bearing. So anyway, that means as far as covering conventions, it's covering this past one, if you can call it a convention, which you technically can, but didn't really feel like much of one. And then back in 2012, when the Democrats had their convention in town, I was helping to cover that. So I took sort of a editorial side of that. So I was not out at the convention on the streets reporting, but I was working with reporters and editing their reports on that back in 2012. So I did get a pretty good comparison between pandemic year and a normal year for a convention. But yeah, that's the length of my convention resume. Usually how it works, right? So WFAE is the local public radio station, and then it's a part of National Public Radio, and so NPR they'll always cover the conventions, and so we'll make sure listeners know what's going on. But for sort of like our local resources, we won't expend expend that energy.
Awesome. Oh, very interesting. Thank you. Alrighty. Um, what is your specific job at conventions? What do you do? Where do you go? You kind of already answered this a little bit, but maybe just go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, I mean, so right, there's everything that's happening inside the convention, which is really noteworthy. Well, okay, sometimes it's noteworthy, right? In a lot of ways, conventions are are this kind of event where you know what's going to happen, right? For most conventions, you know how the vote is going to go, and it's more of just a big campaign rah-rah these days. But there are interesting things that happen inside a convention, right? But when it comes to our coverage, what we're really looking at is sort of how the convention is impacting the Charlotte region. And so a lot of the stories that we look at, back in 2012 and, this year happens outside the convention process, right? This is sort of back in 2012, covering the protests, covering how the city and the police managed those protests and the free speech zone and things like that, how the city prepared to put on a convention back in 2012. And two, I mean, this year there was some of that feeling too, but the idea that Charlotte has arrived as a city on the international stage by hosting a convention, and looking at that kind of preparation and that kind of attitude, and what that means, what it takes for a city to put on a convention like that. And a lot of it is a lot of it is looking at some expenditures and just the management of how this works on the local level. And the question we were asking back in 2012 and that we were going to ask now is is it worth it for a city to put on a convention? It costs money and the city gets reimbursed for a lot of that. But, for example, back in 2012, so many people, couldn't go to work uptown for a few days because the convention had taken over. And then, certainly there's this idea that because we get so much publicity, everyone here, Charlotte, North Carolina, throughout the nation and the globe, this could be really good for business. It could draw people here in the future. We could get more conventions. We could, it put us in a good light. And to what extent does that actually pay off? What is the economic impact of it? So it's almost these side peripheral stories that we look at as far as the convention, and less about, unless it's sort of the North Carolina, South Carolina delegation, less about sort of the dynamics on the floor. And especially this year, I mean, it was so intriguing because you had so many people who, back in 2012, it seemed like a whole bunch of people wanted that convention, whether you were a Democrat, whether you were a Republican. People were really trying to get that. But, this time around, a lot of people did not want the convention. And so there's that whole dynamic too. And, Charlotte ended up sort of in the whole process of trying to get the convention, bidding against itself. And so it's these stories that we kind of look at.
Do you think it's because of COVID that a lot of people didn't want this convention, or they just didn't want it in general?
I think the pandemic built some of that, but right from the get-go, you had a lot of people unsure about it. It took a little while for some of that to unravel. You had city council and the mayor kind of hard charging for the convention. And then when it came down to actually proving the contract for the convention, that's when you finally felt some tangible pushback, and where some city council members, were hearing from constituents and were saying, hey, do you actually want this convention? And it was a pretty close vote about approving that contract. And so that was, several months before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit, right? And so, for some people, that really added to it, right? You don't want a super spreader event, and it was hard to tell what this convention would look like. But then, but then some people did want, if you're a business and you've been shut down for a couple of months, the lure of convention business looks pretty good. So, I mean, there was some divided opinion as far as that goes.
Alrighty. What would you say was the most difficult part of covering the convention?
Well, this year was that we just didn't know if there was going to be one or not. and so, 1 week, the president said we're moving all of a sudden, and the organization that actually the host committee, the RNC host committee, hadn't gotten word about that before he tweeted it, and then the next week, okay, is it on, or is it moving to Tampa? And so it was just a back and forth and back and forth. And at the start of the pandemic, it was really hard to figure out where we were going to be at this point in time. And so for this convention, it was just all the uncertainty. And I mean, it made it intriguing, but it certainly made it hard to to predict anything. And it was kind of doing a podcast every other week. It was kind of a fly by the seat of our pants at that point. So
with everything going on at the moment, do you have any particular methods of staying informed with accurate information?
Well, as a reporter, let me think. So there was this instance where last week I did an interview with the Mecklenburg County Elections Director, and everyone's been very clear that it is there are safeguards to being sent multiple ballots with absentee ballots, right? I mean, there's been a lot of scrutiny, and the president has certainly fueled that about mail-in voting and things like that. But he was saying, look, there was a problem where there were a couple hundred ballots that were sent out twice to people, but he said, we caught that, and there's no way to do that and not catch it. I mean, it's this is a secure system. And so after that interview aired, someone wrote in and said, look, I hear the elections director saying this, but we've gotten like 5 ballots or something, and my first thought is, you've gotten 5 ballot requests, because that's what campaigns do. They're, on both sides, they're sending out request forms so that you can just mail them back and get your actual ballot. But it's certainly something that you don't want to discount, because there's the possibility that it could happen, right? And so I say double check, but we spoke, and he was adamant that it was no, they were ballots. And I said, well, just when you get a chance, take a picture, send it to me, and let's look at it, and he did that, and he admitted he realized it was a request form, not an actual ballot. But I think it's to proceed cautiously, and to not discount information that you think, well, there's not a very good chance of that, but to just double check. And I think that I have the sort of reputable news organizations where you know, I get a lot of information, and I'm wary of people's posts on social media, right? There's often times where I want to go and correct them, but I feel like that would kind of be a waste of my of my time. You know, I can do those things in my job on a whole scale basis, but you know, right? It's just being critical, and if you know, going to the source of information when you're reporting it, you know, and for example, I was just looking up rules for voter registration and for early voting and things like that, and you know, instead of relying on websites that kind of summarize that, just go straight to the source, to the Board of Elections, and verify information that way.
Yeah, it'd be really hard to do that with social media. You have to spend a lot of time and energy.
Yeah, you would have to spend it. I get upset though. I get upset. I see posts and it makes me angry that people so easily give out wrong information, and there's that kind of self-righteous about it too.
Yeah, and then people just like believe it without double checking.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Yeah, that's right.
This kind of goes with the first question, or the question I just asked you, but I see that you often do fact checks. What is the process of doing these? Is it kind of similar to what you just said about staying informed with accurate information?
Yeah, so the fact check process, and I should say, you know, when I do a fact check, it's not me really doing the fact check, right? So like our fact check segments is partnering with PolitiFact, who is known for all their fact checks, right? They have a full-time reporter at WRAL, a TV station in Raleigh, who does all these fact checks. And so how it works, and you know, we wanted that to, you know, be part of what we do, but we have limited resources, right? So a lot of what we do is trying to figure out how to maximize our reach with the resources we have. So I do a sort of like occasional weekly fact check with Andy Specht, who's at WRAL and does that full time. And what his process is like is that, you know, he takes a claim, you know, and he's mostly doing political fact checks. He takes a claim and, you know, tries to, you know, vary it between, you know, Republican and Democrat, and examines it, right? And he goes back and he digs up records, and you know, a lot of it is talking to people who are in the know on this, whether it's COVID related and you're talking to epidemiologist about the spread, or whether it's going back into documents and actually, you know, looking at a political claim about, you know, did this candidate try to block this legislation or something like that. And then, so he'll write out his article, and he has he votes, you know, because they have to assign a, you know, mostly false, pants on fire, false, true, mostly true, sort of designation to it. And so it's him and two other editors who vote on what it should be. And so I interview him about that. And sometimes, you know, I read something and I read part of the fact check and I think, well, but I could see this going the other way, you know? And so it does involve, you know, kind of pushing back a little bit on the fact check at times too, to make sure that listeners understand where they got on their assessment of it.
Um, with consideration of some of the topics you cover, is it difficult to stay unbiased?
I think it can be at times, but and I also think that I'm used to trying to um, take a position where it's more of an assessment of both sides, and looking at something critically. And I don't think ambivalence is the right word, but I think it's sort of a studied observation. And I think that, right, a reporter doesn't just write about the facts. The reporter puts facts together to understand the context so that you can get a bigger picture and understand the dynamics in a situation. And so I think that trying to understand those dynamics is very important, and I take that very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think that right there is sometimes I think that people think that, you know, there is a judgment call in some articles or reporting. I think that often situation does require some judgment, but it requires saying what something is. You know, you shouldn't shy away from making an assessment once you've spent a lot of time gathering all the facts and understanding a situation. But sure, I mean, it can definitely be difficult when you hear something that's not true and you keep on hearing it and hearing it. And I think that's the thing that probably is the hardest to deal with, because you want, you know, that's the most infuriating thing, is you want people to have a good understanding, and that can definitely get in the way. So yeah, but I mean, I think there are certainly times where you have to, I think that everyone comes to situations with bias, whatever those biases are, political, or otherwise. And I think that it's understanding what that is, and navigating it. But yeah, I mean, I think really cultivating sort of a studied observation and understanding of the dynamics is important. I'm not very happy with that answer, Lizzie. I wish I had a better articulated and put answer on that. But for now, I guess that'll suffice.
I mean, it was good for me.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see. Is there a certain topic or subject you have wanted to cover but have not been able to?
Yeah, I saw that in one of your questions, and I was trying to think through the past few months, and in some ways, it's just been it's been so busy, and things just, big things just drop day by day.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you'll hear a name come out of the blue. I think recently it was like Gordon Sondland or something, and it's like, oh, that's right, there was all of that happened just a few months ago, and there's this and this. And so yeah, in some ways, it's been frustrating, the pace of news, and that you gotta just keep on, you know, you gotta move from one subject to the other, but you also have to make sure that you're going, you know, there are areas that you're dedicated to going into deep, and you know, your organization, you know, whether it's you as a reporter or whether it's other reporters there, are kind of sticking to some of these storylines that maybe aren't making big headlines, but are still really important for people to know. I mean, I think that especially with the pandemic, all the ins and outs of healthcare are really important, and I think it's been sometimes hard to get at some of those deeper stories. I think that, you know, in thinking pre-pandemic, there were some areas where I thought that I wish there was more coverage on our end, and in Charlotte too. I mean, I think, for example, business does not get a whole lot of coverage anymore. Just fewer reporters and things like that. I think that you know, one thing that the past few months we have been able to look a little bit deeper into the criminal justice system and how that affects people, and especially those without much means, and you know, often African Americans. I think that, you know, telling more of those stories and understanding that is something that I'd like to see more coverage of as well. Yeah, those are two things that come to mind. I mean, and then, right, there's always all the stories that kind of give you a flavor for where you live, that may not be, you know, big, necessarily important stories, but they're kind of good stories to know about, you know, the sort of neighborhood person who's making a difference, or you know, some quirks and things like that. But yeah, it just feels like there's
like
so
nice little feel-good stories.
yeah, I guess so. They give you a feel for where you live and stuff, and yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on.
I know it must be like tough having to keep up with everything, because it's like something new comes out every other day.
Yeah, it does.
Awesome. So what are your goals for the rest of the year?
Huh. I was anticipating that question and trying to think of a good answer. You know, in some ways, and I feel like this is vague, but right, it's in some ways to deal with, substantively, to deal with some of these bigger dynamics and stories going on, whether it's voting and elections, and understanding that process, and understanding the candidates, and how this is coming together. And, you know, if it's not resolved by election day, you know, figuring out what that means. I mean, and also, you know, so much about understanding North Carolina as this sort of pivotal state in the national scene as far as politics, but also being able to go deep, as we were talking about, on some of these other stories that I think can get lost in the shuffle, but that are that are important, and that people need to understand. And maybe after November there will be time to catch your breath too.
Hopefully.
We'll see.
one more question.
Yeah,
So I know you and Steve have a
Steve. Yeah,
yes, have a podcast together. Tell me about that. Like, why did you guys decide to create it? Was there a big something big that happened that made you want to create it? Things like
yeah.
that.
I mean, again, I think it's telling that real local story of bringing a convention to town and what it means to put one on, and um, what are the benefits and what are the costs and all the kind of crazy and intriguing stories that come out of it. And we thought that a podcast would be a good way to do that. Right? Like when we're doing stories for air, they're anywhere from 1 minute to 7 minutes is a pretty long one. And so we thought, it'd be nice to have a little bit more time uh, and fun to tell a longer story in that regard. And right, this was such a intriguing convention because it was so split about people wanting it to come here, and Charlotte was bidding against itself, and there were just all these weird and intriguing dynamics, and we thought that would make sense to explore in a little bit of a longer format.
So, well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
for your time, letting me interview you. It was very nice to meet you via Zoom.
yeah, it's nice to talk to you, Lizzie. Are you interviewing other people, or how does this
um,
work?
no, ma'am, I'm just interviewing you. We each got
Oh,
one person.
okay. Do you know if anyone's interviewing Steve?
Um, I think I might have seen his name on there. Don't quote me, but
Okay, okay.
I'm not too sure.
Yeah, okay. Good deal. And then you kind of put this all together as a class, or um what does the
I
finished product look
I know that we or Professor Moyen is going to upload this into like a shared thing so we can all see each other's. And then our final paper will be about our interview, so my interview with you, and then we have to watch, I think, 2 other people's interviews and kind of go off of that.
like? Oh, interesting. And are they all reporters you're interviewing, or is it mixed then?
I believe it's mixed.
Like
I
reporters and
know,
politicians and
yeah, I think there was maybe one other reporter. Um, there was a Black Lives Matter activist. Um, and then I think there was one other there was a few other people, but one person I know I think worked in the state government.
okay.
So
Oh,
it was
good. So
mixed.
you're getting a nice cross section of people who are involved with conventions and things
Hmm.
like that. That's yeah, and I bet your project changed a little bit too with the weird convention we had.
Yeah, we were supposed to go, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't get to go to the convention. Steve tried to get in at points, but he basically just had to hover around and talk to a couple delegates who were there. So yeah, but well, anyway, well, good luck to you and good luck on the project. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was fun talking.
Thank you. Good luck to you as well.
All right, well, take care, Lizzie.
You too.
Let me know if
Bye.
you have any other questions. And if for some reason I don't respond, just give me a call. And we have a really heavy duty spam filter.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
you
Sounds
think
good.
I still have to search it to get your messages, but I should probably be able to adjust something on my end for that too. So,
Okay, awesome.
but anyway, All right. Well, take care.
You too. Thank you so much.